Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a land called Rome, there lived a lady named Agrippina. Now, Agrippina wasn't just any lady. Oh no, she was like a super smart, super strong lioness who knew exactly what she wanted. And what she wanted most of all was power. Not just a little bit of power, but all the power. She wanted to be in charge, to tell everyone what to do, and to make sure her family was the best of the best. Agrippina came from a very important family, like a royal family, but in Rome. Her great-grandpa was the very first emperor, a man named Augustus. So she had important blood in her veins, like a superhero with special powers from birth. But back then, being important didn't mean you were safe. Oh no, it was a very dangerous world where people fought and schemed to get to the top. It was like a giant game of musical chairs, but if you lost, you didn't just sit down. Sometimes you disappeared forever. Agrippina was not going to let that happen to her or her family. She was going to fight. She was going to make sure her son, a little boy named Nero, would be safe and powerful. She looked at little Nero, who was just a small, sweet boy, and she saw a future emperor. She saw a crown on his head, even when he was just playing with his toy soldiers. First, Agrippina got married to a very important man, and then she had Nero. But things were tricky. There were other important people, like the emperor at the time, Claudius. Claudius already had his own kids, so it wasn't clear that Nero would be next in line to be emperor. But Agrippina had a plan, a very clever, very secret plan. She worked super hard to get Claudius to notice Nero. She was always whispering in Claudius's ear, telling him how wonderful Nero was, how smart and kind and perfect he would be as an emperor. It was like she was a magical saleswoman, making Claudius believe that Nero was the best toy in the whole shop. And guess what? Her plan worked. Emperor Claudius adopted Nero, which meant Nero was now like his very own son, even though he wasn't really. This was a huge victory for Agrippina. It meant Nero was now in line to be emperor, right after Claudius. But Agrippina wasn't done yet. Oh no, a lioness never stops protecting her cub. She made sure that anyone who might stand in Nero's way, anyone who might try to take his spot, would, well, they just seemed to have bad luck. Some people got sent far away, others just disappeared. It was like Agrippina was playing a giant game of chess, and she was moving all the pieces to make sure Nero would win. She was so good at it that nobody could stop her. She chose the best teachers for Nero, men who would teach him how to be a smart emperor. She made sure he learned everything he needed to know, from how to speak in front of big crowds to how to ride a horse. She wanted him to be perfect. And finally, after lots of hard work and very clever plans, the day came. Emperor Claudius was gone, and little Nero, Agrippina's son, became the new emperor of Rome. Can you imagine? A boy who was barely a grown-up, now in charge of the whole enormous Roman Empire? Agrippina stood right next to him, beaming with pride. She had done it. She had made her son the most powerful boy in the world. She held his hand tight, almost like she was still holding the strings, ready to pull them whenever she needed to. Nero might have been the emperor, but everyone knew who was really in charge. It was Agrippina, the mom who made him a monster. Or, oops, I mean the mom who made him emperor. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Because even though Nero had the crown and his mom had helped him get it, something very strange started to happen between them. It was like their super close bond started to get sticky, and not in a good, sweet way. It was more like a spider web, holding Nero tighter and tighter. And soon, that tightness would become a big, scary problem. A problem that would lead to a very unhappy ending for his lioness mom.
So there Nero was, the shiny new emperor. Everyone was cheering and clapping, but guess who was right there beside him, holding his hand, almost squeezing it a little too tight? That's right, his supermom, Agrippina. Now, You might think that because Nero had a big fancy crown on his head, he got to tell everyone what to do, right? Wrong. Oh, so very wrong. It was still Agrippina who was the real boss, like a secret queen pulling all the strings from behind a giant curtain. Imagine you have a favorite toy, maybe a puppet. You move its arms and legs, you make it talk, right? Well, Agrippina was doing that to Nero. She was like the ultimate puppet master, and Nero was her most important puppet. When Nero sat on his big golden throne, ready to make important decisions for all of Rome, guess who sat right next to him, sometimes even on a special higher chair? Agrippina. She would whisper in his ear, "Nero, my darling, tell them to do this." Or, "No, Nero, that's not smart. Tell them that instead." It was like she had a tiny little microphone in his ear, always telling him what to say and do. She decided who got to be important helpers in the Roman government. If Agrippina liked someone, suddenly they had a very important job, like being in charge of the soldiers or collecting taxes. If she didn't like someone, poof, they were gone. It was like she had a magical wand that could make people famous or make them disappear. She filled the whole palace with her friends, her helpers, people who would always listen to her, not really to Nero. Agrippina even picked out Nero's clothes. She decided what he would wear for important meetings. She told him when to smile, when to look serious, and when to wave to the crowds. It was like he was a little actor in a play, and she was the director, telling him exactly how to perform for everyone. Imagine your mom picking out your clothes every single day, even when you're a grown-up king. That's how it was for poor Nero. The Roman palace was a very tense place back then. It was like walking on eggshells. Everyone knew that if you wanted something done, you didn't ask Emperor Nero. Oh no, you had to go to Agrippina. Her power was like a gigantic dark cloud that covered the whole palace, blocking out the sun, blocking out Nero himself. There were some smart older men who were supposed to help Nero learn how to be a good emperor. One was named Seneca, a very wise teacher, and another was Boris, a strong general who was in charge of the emperor's special guards. These men actually liked Nero and wanted him to be a great ruler, but even they had to bow down to Agrippina. They tried to give Nero good advice, but Agrippina would often interrupt or just give them a very stern look, and suddenly Nero would change his mind. It was like Agrippina always had the final word, no matter what. Nero was just a young man. Imagine being a teenager, and your mom still treats you like a baby. He had big dreams like playing music and writing poems and maybe even racing chariots. But Agrippina thought these things were silly. "Nero," she would say, "emperors don't play silly songs. Emperors make important laws. Stop wasting time." She wanted him to be serious, strong, and exactly like she wanted him to be. She wanted him to be her perfect little emperor puppet. At first, maybe Nero was okay with it. He was young and his mom was super smart and knew a lot. She had worked so hard to make him emperor, after all. Maybe he thought, "Oh, my mom just knows best." It was like being a little bird in a cozy nest, but the nest suddenly felt like a cage. Agrippina's love, which was supposed to feel warm and cuddly, was starting to feel suffocating, like a giant soft blanket that just kept getting heavier and heavier until he couldn't breathe. He wanted to make his own friends, but Agrippina would say, "No, Nero, they are not good for you." He wanted to go to parties, but Agrippina would shake her head. An emperor stays home and studies. She even got mad if he looked at other girls. "You are the emperor, Nero. You must focus on Rome, not silly girls." This kind of love, where someone holds you so tight you can't move, isn't really love, is it? It's more like a giant invisible chain. And Nero, the boy who was supposed to be the most powerful person in the world, was starting to feel trapped. He had the crown, he had the palace, he had all the power in Rome, but he didn't have something even more important, his own freedom. He was still his mother's little puppet, and a little puppet, no matter how shiny, always wants to cut its strings. And you know what happens when someone feels trapped for a very, very long time? They start to get angry. And then they start to look for a way, any way, to break free. Even if breaking free means doing something very, very daring. Something that would make his powerful mom furious. Something that would change everything between them forever. And that's exactly what Nero started to dream about.
So, Nero was growing up. He wasn't that little boy anymore, the one his mom could just tell what to do like a puppet. Oh no, he was starting to feel his own big, important feelings. He had his own ideas, his own likes, and his own dislikes. And guess what he liked more than boring emperor meetings? He loved music. He loved to sing and play his lyre. That's like a small harp. He loved to write poems and act in plays, even though emperors weren't really supposed to do that. He wanted to be a superstar. But guess who didn't like his new hobbies? That's right, Agrippina. She would stomp her foot and frown her deepest frown. "Nero," she'd say, her voice like thunder, "emperors do not sing silly songs. Emperors do not play in dusty plays. Emperors rule. They make laws. They lead armies. Stop wasting your time with these frivolous things." She wanted him to be a serious, grown-up emperor, just like she imagined, not a singing, dancing showman. It was like Nero had a little bird inside him, wanting to fly, but Agrippina kept the cage locked tight. He wanted to go out and have fun, like other young people. He wanted to explore Rome, maybe even sneak out at night, just like you might want to play with your friends instead of doing homework. But Agrippina was always there, her eyes like a hawk, watching his every move. "Nero, where are you going? Who are you going with? What are you doing?" It was like having a shadow that never left him alone. And then something else started to change. Nero met a lady named Poppaea, and Poppaea was, well, she was super beautiful and super smart, and she was very, very good at getting what she wanted. And what she wanted was to be the most important lady in Rome next to the emperor. And she knew that meant she had to get Agrippina out of the way. Nero liked Poppaea a lot, a whole lot. But Agrippina, oh boy, she hated Poppaea. She thought Poppaea was just trying to steal Nero away from her, to steal his attention, to steal his love. She would shout at Nero, "Nero, that girl is no good. She is tricking you. You must not see her." She tried everything to keep them apart, like a giant angry dragon guarding her treasure, and her treasure was Nero. But Nero wasn't a baby anymore. He was getting bigger and bolder and a little bit angrier. He started to stand up to his mom. "No, mother," he would say, his voice getting louder. "I like Poppaea, and I want to sing. I am the emperor. I can do what I want." It was like a little rumble growing into a big earthquake. Remember Seneca and Burrus, those smart men who were trying to help Nero? They saw what was happening. They saw how sad and trapped Nero felt, and they started to whisper to him, "Your Majesty, you are the emperor. You are strong. You are smart. You can make your own decisions." They were like the little voices in his head telling him he could be free. They helped him see that he didn't have to listen to Agrippina all the time. Slowly, Nero started to make his own rules. He started to spend more time with Poppaea. He started to have his singing parties, even inviting all of Rome to watch him perform. Agrippina would come, but her face would be red with anger, her eyes like burning coals. It was like she was turning into a giant, angry storm cloud ready to burst. Nero even started to make big decisions for Rome without asking his mom first. He would go to meetings and say, "I have decided this," and Agrippina would gasp because she hadn't told him to say that. She tried to interrupt, tried to take over, but Nero would just give her a cold look, a look that said, "Not anymore, mother, not anymore." The arguments between them became louder and more frequent. Sometimes they would yell at each other in front of everyone. Imagine your mom and you having a shouting match in the middle of a big party. That's what it was like for the emperor and his mom. It was super embarrassing for Agrippina. She was the mighty lioness, but now her cub was roaring back, and everyone was watching. Nero even started to take away some of her power. He moved her out of the main palace to a smaller, fancy house far away. He stopped letting her come to all the important meetings. He took away her special guards.
It was like he was slowly, carefully cutting all those puppet strings she had on him. One by one, snip, snip, snip. Agrippina was furious. She couldn't believe her own son, the one she made emperor, was treating her this way. She felt betrayed. She tried to fight back, tried to scare him, tried to tell him he was making a huge mistake. But Nero, the boy who had once been so quiet and obedient, was a different person. He was changing. He was becoming defiant. He was becoming his own kind of monster. A monster that his own mother had created without even knowing it, by holding him too tight for too long. And soon, this big fight, this huge, angry argument between a mother and a son would get so big that it would lead to something truly, incredibly terrible. Something that would make everyone in Rome gasp in shock and remember forever.
So, Nero was now acting like a very grumpy, very angry king. He felt like his mom, Agrippina, was like a giant buzzing fly that he just couldn't swat away. No matter how much he pushed her away, no matter how much he argued, she just wouldn't leave him alone. And you know what happens when someone gets super annoyed? They start to think of drastic things. Very bad things. Nero wanted his mom gone. Not just far away, not just in another house, but gone for good. He thought if she was gone, truly gone, he could finally be totally free. He could play all the music he wanted, marry whoever he wanted, and be the only boss in Rome. But how do you get rid of a super smart, super sneaky lioness like Agrippina? It was like trying to catch smoke. First, Nero tried to be very sneaky. He thought, maybe I can just give her a little bit of poison in her food. Not enough to kill her right away, but just enough to make her sick, until she was too weak to bother him anymore. But Agrippina was too smart. She had heard stories of sneaky poisons. She had her own special helpers who would taste her food first, just in case. And if a helper got sick, Agrippina knew not to eat it. Whew! Nero's first sneaky plan failed big time. Then Nero tried to make it look like an accident. He thought, maybe she can have an accident when she's riding in her carriage. So he made the roads bumpy and made sure the carriage drivers were very clumsy. But Agrippina was tough. Like a superhero, she would always bounce back, dusty but unharmed. It was like she had 9 lives, like a cat. Nero would hear she was fine and stamp his foot in frustration. Ugh, why won't she just disappear? Nero started to get super worried. He felt like Agrippina was always watching him, always judging him, even from far away. He started to get paranoid, which means he thought everyone was secretly plotting against him, and his mom was the biggest plotter of all. He just knew she wanted to take back her power, that she wanted to put him down and be the real empress again. This thought grew in his head like a huge, scary monster, whispering mean things. Then he got a truly wicked and wild idea. An idea so sneaky, so unbelievable, it sounds like something from a super spy movie. He thought, what if I build her a special boat? A beautiful, fancy boat to take her on a lovely trip across the sea. But this boat will have a secret button. A button that makes the bottom of the boat fall open. And then, splash! She'll fall into the water, and it will look like a terrible accident. Can you believe it? He actually did it. He built the boat. He invited his mom for a wonderful, relaxing boat ride under the stars. Agrippina, probably still a bit suspicious, went along. Imagine the moonlight shining on the water, the gentle waves. It all seemed so peaceful. But then Nero pushed the secret button. Click! And the bottom of the boat really did fall open. Whoosh! Water rushed in and the boat started to break apart. It was a total disaster. Agrippina was plunged into the dark, cold water. Nero waited, holding his breath, thinking, finally, she's gone. But Agrippina was not just smart. She was also a very strong swimmer. And she was so brave. She grabbed onto a piece of wood from the broken boat and started to swim towards the shore, even though it was far away and dark. Her brave helper even pretended to be her, shouting for help, which confused Nero's guards, giving Agrippina more time to escape. When Nero got the news, "Your Majesty, Agrippina, she survived." His face turned green with shock. He couldn't believe it. It was like she was a ghost who wouldn't stay dead. He was furious. He was terrified. What would Agrippina do now that she knew he had tried to kill her? She would surely come back for revenge. His heart pounded like a drum. His guilt was a tiny, tiny whisper, but his fear was a giant, roaring lion. Everyone in Rome heard about the accident. Everyone knew it wasn't really an accident. The royal court, all the important people started to whisper. Did the emperor really try to kill his own mom? They were shocked. They were scared. If Nero could do this to his own mom, what would he do to them? It was like a giant dark cloud of fear settled over Rome. Nero felt like he was losing his mind. His mom was like an indestructible monster that he had created, and now she was coming back to haunt him. He knew he had to finish the job. He knew he had to get rid of her for good, no matter what it took. He had started down a very dark road, and there was no turning back. His mommy had to go, and this time, he would make sure she didn't survive. And what happened next was even more shocking, more terrible than anything that had come before.
Nero couldn't take it anymore. His mom, Agrippina, was like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. She had survived the poison. She had survived the crazy sinking boat. She just wouldn't stay gone. And Nero, the emperor, was shaking with fear and a terrible cold anger. He felt like he had to act now, or she would surely come for him. It was like a giant, dangerous game of tag, and he had to tag her out forever. So he sent his meanest, scariest soldiers, not just a few, but a whole group of big, tough men with swords, clanking and stomping. They were like a pack of angry wolves sent to hunt down the Lioness. It was nighttime, dark and quiet, when they marched to Agrippina's house, the one he had forced her to live in, far away from his own palace. Agrippina was in her bed, probably trying to sleep, but maybe she felt a chill, a tiny whisper of danger in the air. Suddenly the doors burst open with a crash. Bam! The scary soldiers stormed in, their shadows long and spooky in the flickering torchlight. Their leader, a grim-faced man, walked right up to her bed. Agrippina wasn't scared, not really. She was a lioness, remember? She was brave, even when facing terrible danger. She looked at the soldier, her eyes wide and piercing. She knew this was it. This was the end of her story. And in that moment, she understood everything. She understood how her fierce love, how her endless trying to make Nero perfect, had twisted him. It had turned him into this monster who was now sending soldiers to kill his own mother. And then she said the most amazing, most heartbreaking words. She looked the soldier right in the eye and she pointed to her stomach where Nero had grown inside her, and she shouted with all her strength, her voice echoing in the silent room, "Strike the womb!" Gasp! Can you imagine? She was telling them to hurt the very part of her body that had given birth to Nero, the son who had become her destroyer. It was like she was saying, this is where he came from. This is where the monster was made. And then the soldiers did what they were told, and Agrippina, the mighty lioness, was gone. The news spread like wildfire through Rome. Boom! It was like a huge thunderclap. The emperor had killed his own mother. People whispered in the streets, their faces pale with shock. How could he? How could a son do such a thing? Even in dangerous Rome, this was a truly awful, unforgivable act. Nero, meanwhile, was trying to pretend everything was fine. He tried to tell everyone, "Oh, my mother, she was plotting against me. She was trying to hurt me. I had no choice." He even tried to make it sound like she was a bad, evil lady. But deep down, do you think he felt good? Probably not. He probably felt a cold, empty ache and a huge knot of fear. He might have been smiling on the outside, trying to look strong, but inside, a little part of him was probably crying, or maybe turning even colder. His teachers, Seneca and Burrus, who had tried to help him be a good emperor, were probably shaking their heads. They had seen him change from a scared little boy to a powerful emperor, and now to a truly scary ruler. This act, killing his own mom, was like a giant invisible stamp on his forehead that said, "Tyrant." That means a ruler who is cruel and uses his power to hurt people. Agrippina's death was a huge, giant turning point for Nero. It was like he had crossed a line he could never uncross. Before, maybe there was still a tiny bit of good in him, a tiny bit of the boy who listened to his mom. But after this, he felt like he could do anything. He could be as mean as he wanted, as wild as he wanted, as cruel as he wanted. There was no one left to tell him no, no one left to stop him. And so, the boy who was made emperor by his mother's endless ambition, the boy who became a monster, now had no one to guide him, no one to hold him back. His mom's fierce love, which had started out trying to protect him, had ended up making him the very worst kind of emperor. And Nero's story after this terrible, awful act became even darker, filled with more crazy decisions and sad endings for many, many people.